Hello friends and followers, this is episode 27, 13th of August 2017. It's good to see the regular visitors back watching another episode of mine. It's good to have you here and liking and commenting on the video. It helps me get noticed more. In this episode I'll be covering the life and work of Thomas Townsend Brown. He was the pioneer on electrographics and gravitated device. I will be covering more of the interesting aspects of his work, and then I will cover some of his biohistory at the end. The story goes that one day he noticed how violently a X-ray tube was vibrating, like it was trying to escape the equipment when it was charging, that he wanted to investigate it further and found that the electro-ray tube, which is shown here, also known as the Coolidge tube, had some sort of thrust when he was experimenting with them, when it was charging up the plates, because it uses a capacitance. I believe Tesla was also experimenting with the same tube, and that's where he got his radiant energy ideas from, which you can watch in that other episode I made previously called Tesla Fringe Science. Now, also Tesla had invented a anti-gravity device using some sort of alloy mix, and the information on that was lost, or maybe the FBI got their hands on it, because he had it all in a secret chest which they got their hands on when he died. But you can listen to all that and see what I present in a previous episode, so I won't cover it here. But maybe Townsend Brown had discovered the same thing with some anti-gravity effect of these particular high voltage charging capacitors and tubes, X-ray tubes. As it says here, the origins of electrogravitics can be traced back to Nikola Tesla's work with high voltage shock discharges at the turn of the 20th century, and somewhat later to Thomas Townsend Brown's relatively unpublicized discovery that electrostatic and gravitational fields are closely intertwined. Unfortunately, the electrogravitic effect has been, for the most part, been ignored by mainstream academics because the phenomenon isn't anticipated by either classical electrostatics or general relativity. Here are some original photographs of him with his models that he produced. As you can see, they're very flying saucer looking, and umbrellas that sort of charged and caused a lift underneath, and as you can see, the umbrella is saucer shaped like a UFO as well. But they had a cord going to it because they had to produce high voltage from a generator or capacitor, and of course you can only do that from a ground generator at that time. Of course, nowadays they may have nuclear generators that generate heaps of electricity that can power these high voltage craft. So it's all theory on what could be happening today in the secret stealth craft research or UFO technology side of things. Here we see they're using a balance where they're showing that it was lifting up weights, and they could measure how much force there was, and they could change the direction of the charge, and it would lower and go higher, and it could go left and right instantly without banking. And there's various graphs here showing how the charges worked. Clearly there's something special in the saucer half-domed shape, how the charges wrap around it, and also the fields. It was later renamed Bifield Brown effect because he named it after his mentor, as it says here. But he done the bulk of the research and experiments. As the wiki here says, that it creates an iron wind, but there's been a lot of debate whether the lift is all iron wind and not anti-gravity effect. I will go more into that in a minute. Here they're talking about how he discovered the various aspects of the phenomenon, and from the size of the surfaces to the charge, the high voltages used, and also the mass and how much atmospheres and or atmosphere pressure. So they did a lot of different experiments to determine all the different factors here. How the plates were designed, the distance between the plates, the materials used. As you can see here, his research led to the idea that charging the nose cone and also the edge of the front wings could reduce drag of the wind that it's passing through, because it causes a repellent effect, which is used on the B-2 bomber now. I've come across this article and it says the Bifield-Brown effect involves charging a capacitor to a very high voltage in which there is a reported loss of weight involving a force that is felt by the capacitor in the direction of the positive plate. This is thought to be an anti-gravity effect. Around the world, numerous people have developed and built small devices which are intended to exploit the Bifield-Brown effect, with these devices being called lifters. I will show a picture of some of them in a minute. These devices are able to fly about, sometimes tethered to the ground and sometimes flying on their own. Recently, larger lifter devices have been built. Some of these larger lifters fly autonomously. It has been reported that Dr. Brown observed the Bifield effect in a vacuum in very sophisticated experiments. This would suggest that the Bifield effect is not to what some people call iron wind, but until recently, to the best of my knowledge, no one has tested the Bifield effect in a vacuum using a lifter. Well, this has actually been done, and I will show you more information on that. There was a collection of photographs of some lifters that people built, and this guy goes on to say that the Russians had been experimenting with this and created free energy and anti-gravity. But this was back in 2009 or 8, and still it's 2017 and we still have no news on TV or these craft flying in the sky or free energy. So has it been suppressed or was it all talk? We don't know. Here's a apparatus that he was using in France, because he was sponsored by the France Aerospace to do experiments, and here they claim that he was flying 2 mini saucers in a near vacuum, so to discount iron wind. So whether he had discovered something and it hadn't been published yet, or it's been suppressed, we don't really know. But I found some other people experimenting up to our current time, and it seems they have debunked the lifters working in a vacuum. However, one guy tried a different approach and just vacuumized one part of the lifter and it still would move. So maybe it does work in a vacuum, but in an entirely different way to how people thought it had to be done. Also, NASA did their own experiments with it, and here's a side-by-side of an old video on YouTube. One keeps spinning, which is in atmosphere, and the other one in total vacuum would be absolutely still. So they proved it was only iron wind that was moving it. But as you can see, they got the whole thing in a vacuum, unlike the previous guy that was experimented with putting only half of it in a vacuum, where it can't get that iron wind because the other part of it's in a vacuum. So, I don't know. It's very interesting. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe people can keep experimenting and playing and trying in vacuum. There's plenty of footage on YouTube, have a look for it, but here's a couple of samples I've added. A lifter that someone's built, they're trying outside, but it's got a thin wire that you don't see going to it for the high voltage, because I don't think it could have its own power generation and lift up, because it would be too heavy. So it's not practical in that respect. And also some people here demonstrating the iron wind as it spins around two sources on a balance. And then some classical footage from the man himself showing some really old 8mm tape converted to MP4. So there you can see his umbrella design that's sort of lifting up. It's not too stable though. And also the celebrating there, so they must have got some sort of victory happening there. And I see they've got a vacuum tube or glass that goes over top of their experiment, so they can try it without atmosphere or low atmosphere. So I guess the iron engine would work. It would get you up to the edge of space, and then you could switch to some other type of propulsion, I guess, if it's feasible for lifting up heavy weights. It does look like they're adding a heavy mass underneath the umbrella design there though. So they were trying heavier and heavier weights to see how much it could lift and how much high voltage you needed, I suppose. Higher voltage, more thrust. Here they talk about the comparisons to the new EM drive, electromagnetic drive, that uses no fuel and causes a warp field that causes the craft to constantly fall into the bent space in front of it to cause propulsion. And also they're talking about here the Tesla's ether system and how they'd explain it all with relativity and conventional science, mixing in with the old science. Maybe the old science wasn't wrong after all, and it's just how we look at things. I just want to change the wording of how it is to fit in with quantum physics. And here the Chinese said they have successfully proven that the EM drive works, and they've also tested it on a space satellite. So how about that? A lot of people had doubts and sort of destroyed the wikis on it and stuff because they didn't believe that it was real and hadn't been proven. The EM drive is totally different to the lifter idea or iron drive though. He has many patents, as you can see, a big list here, in various countries as well. He moved around a bit. I'm not too sure if that's because of his work or maybe some other political reasons like being treated badly by USA. I only focused on a few patents from the chapters here with some figures so you can have a look. Of course there might have been some patents suppressed by the government and for top secret reasons. Of course he may have not wanted to patent everything that he had found out, maybe for his own reasons, but we'll never really know that the iron thruster engine was the only thing he did in the anti-gravity work. Here's a picture of him with his wife and daughter, and the reason I'm showing you this is because the daughter, when she's grown up, has written into Reddit and with a big letter explaining about her life with her dad and what she touched and played with in his workshops and what he said to her. Got a bit of a niggle in the throat there. As you can read, someone's asking her a load of questions which she will answer. I won't read it all out, but I'll just read out some key parts from it all and I'll expand it out so you can have enough time to read what's there. But just hit the pause button because I know everyone's a different speed reader. Now she mentions that her dad said his prototype that she played with was similar to Adamski Scout Ship UFO design, and as we have found out since, that Adamski UFOs with the balls underneath were actually hoaxes made from General Motor light bulbs and parts from cars and similar. Here's some diagrams showing how the charges would work around the UFO to cause it to lift. The Adamski Scout Ship, as he called it. Who knows, he may have had one that actually worked with the ball charges underneath, but the Adamski ones were fakes, so they weren't those. I'm not sure if there's been any other UFO sightings with balls underneath that he's referring to, but maybe they do have a prototype that works. Here's some wiki on Adamski and his prototype model ships, that how they debunked them and saw GM written on some of the parts. One could say that GM maybe designed Brown's UFO, but these models were very small and obvious models and weren't actually real craft flying around. So that beats that theory. Here is an interesting article talking about Brown's life and from his early years as a kid, as he grew up and worked at different places. I probably won't read out all of it, but I'll read out some paragraphs here and there. Here it talks about his keen interest in space travel as a younger person, a kid, and also it talks about his interest in X-ray tubes, which we've already covered. It goes on to talk about that he sets up experiments to study the force he had discovered and his Gravitors device, which we probably call lifters. Here it talks about in California he goes to Caltech to study and tries to befriend professors and show his ideas to them, but they didn't accept the ideas, saying it couldn't exist in their discipline for current science theories. So basically they weren't interested. In 1922, so he transferred to Idaho University and started studying there, closer to his home. This is where it gets turned around. He meets Professor Byfield, which was interested in his ideas, and this led to the Byfield-Brown effect theory. So here it talks about how he goes into the Navy, ends up in West Indies in 1932 as a physicist, and also deep sea expedition of 1935. Later in the year, depression took its toll and budget drawbacks forced him to leave the Naval Research Lab. So it talks about more of his life there. Daytime jobs during the 30s, however, it did not prevent Brown from continuing his study of physics in general and the Byfield-Brown effect in particular during available evening and weekend hours. So he's done quite a lot in his life. It talks about here during the war, and that he worked in engineering and radar, and post-war went to Hawaii and worked for Lockheed. So you can read all that there if you're interested in his biohistory. It's a good little paragraph there, but I just don't want to go through it all. It says here in the end that he set up his own corporation to delve more into his ideas and this Byfield effect and anti-gravity experiments. So yeah, very interesting. But in the end, the government and other groups and corporations were interested in what he had to do, despite many patents that he had made. So other people have researched since then, 2004 here. Some guy is talking about his capacitor plate charges and seeing how much force they gave, distance apart. Probably very similar to what Townsend Brown did. And here it shows charts and measurements of lab tests quite interesting read there. You can read it all yourself and pause it and try and understand it all. But you can see it can cause quite a lift, some of these capacitors. So maybe iron engine is not the only thing, but charging capacitors can cause weight loss on the actual capacitor itself, the metal plates. So I'll leave it there. There's probably a lot more that could be said and explained, and probably above my understanding as well. But I hope you enjoyed the episode, and hit the like button and add comments. If you have more information yourself, just post it in the comments there. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next episode. Stay safe, everybody.